If you lift too light, you don't get stronger. Too heavy, and you dig a hole you can't recover from. I've coached lifters to world teams by learning how to wave intensity properly, and here is how to do it right. 1, avoid always maxing out. So always maxing out or doing maximum lifts as often as possible in the training cycle seems like it would make a ton of sense. Just go heavy. Weightlifting is about going heavy. Be a man. Start putting weight on the bar and start pushing yourself. The problem, there are 2 big issues here. 1, something called adaptive resistance. If you continually do the same thing, you're going to get less benefit from it over time. So if our program revolves around a very narrow band of intensity, near maximum or maximum, we are eventually going to become somewhat resistant to the adaptations we could make to that if we constantly expose ourselves to it. The second problem is a lack of training stimulus outside of that one band of intensity. We will not develop good qualities outside of that one narrow range. So when we want to become good weightlifters, we have to consider different things like how much skill we have in the lift, how much exposure we have to training volume that builds work capacity that we can further build on more training, how much training we do that builds basic strength and positional strength and all kinds of other things. If all we do is train really heavy and max out all the time, we miss out on a whole spectrum of training that can potentially build all kinds of other qualities that are necessary for us to become better weightlifters. You can't develop good technical skills if you're only training at maximum intensities. You can't build on, general strength qualities you need that would further result in greater progress elsewhere if all you're doing is maxing out. So, maxing out, while fun and awesome and cool, it can be a big problem if that's all you're doing. And if you're biasing everything in your training towards high intensity, you will miss out on other areas. Point number 2, we define intensity. What are the parameters we use to explain what we want the athlete to do when putting a weight on the bar? We use universal terms or broad terms that allow us to get somewhere close to the actual weight on the bar because it's easier for us to do that than to actually write the exact weight for that day because we might not know exactly what the right weight for the day is. We need something that stands in and allows us to compare programs between different athletes and make something more universal for our coach that can understand what we're doing. So, percentage of 1 rep max is the most common. This would be basing your percentage on an established 1 rep max or a max that you pick as a percentage of that. Say we have a training max we use, which is maybe 5 or 10% below their best in competition. Either way, it's just a percentage of an established number, and it gives us more universal choice so that when we say 2 different athletes do 70%, I know approximately what that is gonna be for each athlete. So the pros of a percentage-based program are that it's universal. When I give 5 athletes 70%, I have a decent idea of what that number is going to be for each athlete, where that falls as far as the zones of intensity, and what that distribution is going to be for my overall program. So it's more universal. The con is that it's not individual. 2 athletes can do 80% for a set of 3. For one, it might be very easy. For one, it might be very hard. So we don't capture the individual's response or the individual's ability to execute a certain intensity when we prescribe by percentages. The kind of workaround for this is to give athletes a range when you prescribe percentages. So you might give somebody 80 to 85% for the day for 4 sets of 2 reps, and that's your range. That gives them some ability to play and auto-regulate a little bit, but it's not as exact as giving them the exact number or perfect intensity or perfect weight on the bar. The second would be RPE, or the rating of perceived exertion. So we would give somebody RPE 7 or RPE 8. This is very good because it gives us auto-regulation. They can put a program together and you can say, do RPE 7. And you know the athlete's gonna hit a number that's about 3 reps from failure. They can adjust the weight on the bar set to keep that number intact. They can adjust that number to get the weight they want on the bar. All of these things come into play with RPE, and it's very universally usable for a lot of people. The problem is, it's very difficult to apply to Olympic weightlifting because it's ballistic. So with snatch and clean and jerk, you're always applying a relatively high amount of exertion to the lift in order to get the bar past the certain minimum velocity threshold you need to be successful. So there really isn't a good way to compare RPE 7 to 8 to 9 for an individual. It's just very all over the board for them. And one lift could be an RPE 7 if they're out of position, another could be RPE 6 or 2. So it's very difficult to apply to weightlifting, so it doesn't work super well there. It's much better suited for squatting or exercises with high consistency technically that you can be predictable with, and you know that the technique is very much not a factor in. Real quick, if you're tired of guessing your training, check out Weightlifting AI. It's a program I designed to adapt every workout to you, your goals, your schedule, and your recovery. Whether you're a beginner hitting your first snatch PR, a master's lifter trying to train for masters nationals, or a competitor prepping for a meet, the program adjusts as you train. Thousands of lifters are already using it to get stronger and more consistent. Click the link in the description and sign up today. And then finally, velocity. So some people use velocity-based systems. They have tools and metrics to track velocity on the barbell. Again, this is highly accurate as a pro. It's very good for the athlete to be able to look at an exact number of bar speed. They can see how much bar speed drops off set to set, rep to rep, and get good estimates of what to do as far as the number of sets to do or what weight to put on the bar. The downside, it's difficult to implement. You know, you need a bar velocity tracking device or some kind of camera-based system or any number of systems to do. It requires a lot of setup, and for the most part, it's also a bit difficult to apply universally to athletes if their technique becomes a problem. If your technique is all over the place, velocity is almost unnecessary. It's just not going to give you good information. So all of these systems work fine. You can do any number of them, and there are other systems as well you can use, but I would say the most common thing to do when we talk about intensity is going to be either percentage-based systems or RPE-based systems, because these require no special equipment, just the athlete's ability to adhere to the program and apply it to themselves when they actually execute the training you give them. Point number 3, when to train light, moderate, or heavy. So when we choose training intensities in our program, we have to think about what is the actual goal we're looking to accomplish. This little beautiful diagram that was illustrated by clearly a professional is going to show you on that spectrum where we want to be. So if we think about intensities broken into 3 kind of categories here, moderate intensities, heavy intensities, and light intensity, where are we moving different training qualities to? Now, this is not to scale, so assume there's a little bit of variance here, but speed qualities are always going to be trained with slightly lighter loads. So we want to shift more of our training towards lower intensities if our goal is to develop more speed. Now, technical development could happen anywhere on this spectrum, but if we've never done the skill before, or we're trying to teach someone a new skill or perfect something that they're very bad at with heavy weights, we want to shift that volume more towards lighter loads here. So this could actually span all the way across, but we really want to think about how are we training technical skills that have never been done before. We start light and then we progress them more towards heavy loads as we go. Speed qualities are never going to move towards the high intensities because they can't be trained when the weight is not moving fast. Strength qualities, on the other hand, are always going to be trained more towards higher intensities, right? We can train them slightly lighter as well, but as we progress through a training cycle, we're going to see strength trained in this range that is more weight on the bar is going to equal more strength. If we want more basic strength and building that strength, we're going to use more volume, so we have to train slightly lighter. But if we want to build really heavy or build really, really high absolute strength and maximal strength, we have to be at the heaviest weights possible. Hypertrophy, again, this is trained essentially all across the spectrum, but from a practical standpoint, if pure hypertrophy is our goal, then we want to be somewhere in this moderate to heavy range. For Olympic weightlifting specifically, probably on the moderate to high side for things like squats and pulls, where we're going to be training in this more, 6 to 8, heavy 6 to 8 rep range close to failure to develop more hypertrophy there, versus training really, really light like we would if we're bodybuilding and focusing purely on hypertrophy, or if we train too heavy, we just can't accumulate enough volume and it's way too fatiguing. So hypertrophy best trained in this range. It's going to be slightly higher on the higher moderate side, not super, super heavy, and definitely not super, super light unless it's just pure accessory work, for individual muscle groups. And then work capacity, again, same thing. It's a spectrum here, but it's going to be on the lighter side. We're going to train work capacity with complexes and lower intensity ranges, high rep ranges, high amounts of training frequency for work capacity, building as much as we can towards that medium low intensity range. Probably somewhere in that 70 to 80% range is the limit for what we're going to do with work capacity. This is, again, more so in the medium to low range. There's other qualities we can build on this spectrum as well, but from a basic standpoint, we want to look at it from this perspective of where are we allocating our training volume to achieve which goals? If our athlete needs more speed, we shift volume and intensity lower. If our athlete needs more strength, we shift it higher. If we need more hypertrophy, we might move some of that volume to more moderate ranges and condense it here. Again, this is going to be the spectrum of where you're playing with intensity, but we want to know what are we actually trying to achieve goal-wise. That dictates what the intensity bands and ranges we're training in should be. Point number 4, using multiple intensity ranges at the same time. So while we've talked a lot about intensity and how it affects the adaptations you make, we have to consider that in any one training block, in any one mesocycle, we're going to apply more than one intensity range. We aren't just going to train snatch with 70 to 80% ranges the entire time. We're not going to train clean and jerk the same way, 70 to 90. We're going to use a variety of different ranges to develop the qualities we want. So in a, say, mesocycle that's focused more on lower intensity ranges and more speed, we might have a large volume dedicated to 60 to 70%, an equal size volume dedicated to 70 to 80, and then a very small amount between 80 and 90%, because we still want to maintain some exposure to these intensities throughout the entire training cycle so we don't lose touch with exactly how that weight feels or the skill we need at that intensity, but we want to spread our volume out across different ranges. Now, this could be any distribution of this. If you have multiple qualities you need to train or things you want to develop, you can use different intensity ranges within the same week, within the same mesocycle, or even within the same day. You could have a single repetition range at 80 to 90% and then follow that up with back off sets at 70 to 80%, or you could have waves moving up and down here. So some here in 60 to 70, some 70 to 80, some 80 to 90. Again, all intensity ranges can be existing in the week, in a single workout, and within a single mesocycle. We just want to partition them and allocate them to the areas we need so that we develop the qualities we're looking for. Point number 5, what are the tools and how do I do this? How do I manage intensity in a training program? So the first and foremost is good programming. The better you design your training cycle, the better you lay out your system and everything you can, the less you're gonna have to make changes as you go. So good, solid training programs are the first step to managing intensity in a program well. That's all outlined in exactly how to build a program. Once it's done, you should feel pretty confident that you're really, really close to the mark. A good program should get you at least 90% of the way to the right thing right off the bat, okay? Good programming, that's the first step. The second is weekly adjustments. So as an athlete starts to implement your training program and they start to perform, you're going to get indicators back as to how that intensity is behaving, how that training is treating them, how they're responding to the program. If an athlete is doing the training and the volume seems appropriate, but you're seeing that they're getting slower or that they're not doing as well as you should be, or that the indicators you've put into the programs, let's say you've got some singles programmed in that you want to use as a check to tell you, hey, when they hit these singles at 90%, how do they look? If it's looking worse, then weekly make an adjustment, drop the intensity down a little bit so they can still make progress without destroying the whole program. If they're training and the training is going really well and you have some auto-regulation built in their squats, for example, the next week when they hit their RPE 7 and it's 10 kilos higher than it was the week before, that's great. Intensity, the average weight has climbed up. That's really good. We can use that weekly adjustment to actually augment the program you wrote. So weekly adjustments are the way to go about doing this. We don't want to do this day to day because yes, while any one day could be heavier or lighter, if we're constantly going back and forth every single day, adding or reducing weight, we might miss the overall process that needs to take place. Let them adjust the weights on the day that it's planned, the ranges of percentages you've given or the RPEs you've given, but don't make adjustments that are too finite, too small. Weekly is probably the time scale that we really care about. And then this is how our AI system works. So Weightlifting AI adjusts programs the same way I would do it as a person. I would look at what's the feedback the athlete gave me, how did they respond to the training. The AI will then look at the last 3 or 4 weeks and make an adjustment based on that. You don't necessarily have to make adjustments every week because you performed well or drop training down because you performed poorly one week, but you want to make adjustments based on the context of what's been happening. If 3 weeks in a row we've seen an increase in performance, then maybe we extend that and bump the next week up and we have a little increase in intensity again because they're clearly on a good trend. Or if for 2 or 3 weeks there's just been a stagnation of progress and the results not coming up, numbers aren't going up, the AI system should drop you down. So understanding that we can use really advanced tools to look at the context of training that maybe a person wouldn't look at, that's going to benefit us and our athletes from the perspective that we can get better programs out to them, better adjustments out to them, and make real progress by adjusting intensity on a week-to-week basis the way that you should as an athlete and as a coach to make the most progress you can. If you like this video, subscribe and check out the other videos in this series on both training volume and frequency.